Well, good evening once again. I did say a couple of weeks ago that then was the last show of the season, but my goodness, I'd forgotten about the European finals and the FA Cup final as well. And we will be talking about a couple of incidents from the FA Cup final towards the end. But the goings on and the shenanigans in the Europa League final was just something out of this world. And now, of course, I'm talking about from a refereeing perspective. I'm delighted to be joined again once again by former Premier League, former FIFA World Cup, and former head of the PGMOL, Keith Hackett. Thanks again, Keith, for joining us.
Delighted to be on the show, Harold.
Now, the goings on. I mean, it was always without stereotyping or I don't know, if I can't find the other word, Italian and Spanish football, and then having a team from either country in the same final. It was always going to be difficult for Anthony Taylor. So let's just take that point first before we go into the rest of the nonsense and the carry on of that. It was always going to be a difficult game.
Yes, I think that. I think generally the game now is becoming more difficult. I think this is games generally are becoming more difficult at the professional level because we even see in the Premier League, Errol, cheating, which we've discussed in the past, misconduct by players, all brought about in a sense by some relaxed officiating, accepting certain things. And I think that the culmination is that what we've got an explosion at the moment of indiscipline in players, in teams around the world, producing very difficult games for match officials. Now, there's no question that this was going to be challenging. And we have in Anthony Taylor, a world-class referee, World Cup final referee, highly regarded, who is a disciplinarian in the England game by the number of games he's had, 30 games in the season. He had 7 red cards and 118 yellow cards issued in the season. The reason I pose that stat is because on average, it's just over 3 yellow cards per game. But here, in this particular game, it was up to 14 yellow cards. I mean, I did an interview for BBC and they indicated that it was 14. I thought at one stage it was 11.
I actually thought it was 13. Okay, yeah.
Well, let's go for 13. It's a massive number. And I think it reflects that what is the surprise to me is that a yellow card in Europe has weight, it has strength because of their disciplinary process. I think it's 3 yellow cards in successive games or in a period, you get a ban, whereas it's 5+ in the Premier League. So here we've got a situation where UEFA are trying to support its match officials by being strict, but in reality, Taylor, who apparently came out of this game in the media terms as having had a very good game. That to some degree, when you look at that number of yellow cards, 13, showed for me how he had to work extremely hard to keep the game under his control. So, I go back to some of my training in the past. Did he consider stopping the game at some point and initially calling the captains over and issuing a very strict and stern warning to reinforce his authority? Did he attempt that? Was there an option open to him in order to take the players off, to say, look, the indiscipline running through the teams is unacceptable. I'm here to referee a game of football, not a battle. And therefore, could there have been an opportunity for him to take the teams off, to get the UEFA match delegate here involved, and to say, right, we're going to do something. If you don't calm down in the game, then we, UEFA, are going to take action at the particular stadium. So I think ultimately at the end of the day, Taylor battled his way through what was an extremely difficult game for which he got a great deal of praise. In terms of the competition and UEFA, one has to say this is a real damaging image of the game that, of course, resonates around the world.
Doesn't it make hypocrisy, though, Keith, of this shaking hands at the beginning of the game? When they walk along and they shake hands with each other in the match. And no sooner has the game started and they're up to their antics trying to get the other side yellow carded or looking for a free kick. I mean, this one I picked up and I've showed it before. I mean, is this not the height of cheating?
Yes.
They're lying down, looking to see if he's going to get a free kick. Or I can't remember the actual. I think it's. I'm not sure. It looks like one of the Chelsea players, but I might be wrong. So I'm open to correction of that. But doesn't it make a mockery of that whole shaking of hands?
Yes.
Before the
game? I mean,
if I was in charge of referees in a league, and they wanted to do that, I would say no. Very politely, I would write to the clubs and say, please do not expect my match officials to shake hands with your players because they're not going to do it. And once they start that shaking hands, I'd have my match officials stand back and let them shake hands with each other. But don't shake hands with me and then come along 2 minutes later and give me a mouthful because of something that you perceived was against you.
Yeah, I think that it's a fair point. I mean, you know, the introduction of the handshake was to actually try to promote fair play. It's interesting, isn't it? Because when you look at the laws of the game, and not the specific laws, but the introduction bit, it talks about the spirit of the game and the hope that the referee will not be involved. And then what we see is, you know, we've got this increasing amount of cheating that's going on in the game. And we also have to recognize that, you know, in Spain and in Italy, the average yellow cards, whilst it's 3 in England, in the Premier League on average, it's about 5 plus in both those leagues in Europe. So for me, I think, you know, when you're appointed to these games, we've all been there, haven't we, Errol? We've suddenly got that letter or that communication that says you're going to have a final. And you want the final to be a game that you remember. You want your involvement in that game to be something that you know, I live with the fact that I refereed the 100th FA Cup final. It lives in the memory of lots of people.
Of course.
And it's something that I'm very proud to have participated. And you know, leading up to the FA Cup final, I always thought, what if this goes pear-shaped? It's going to be an embarrassment for me. It's going to be an embarrassment for the game as a whole. And I think that if you are looking at the two teams involved in this game, the first thing I would say is somehow they've got to be hit in the pocket, both teams.
But Keith, the hit in the pocket, I mean, these guys are earning telephone numbers.
Yeah, but I mean,
hit in the pocket, it's not really. There has to be some other way.
Well, I was going to take that one stage further, Errol, by saying that would you want to sponsor a football team as a headline sponsor of a team that purports chaos on the field of play and unfair play? Would you want to be associated? If you're a major brand, why would you want to be associated with a team that's not playing in a fair and equitable manner? I mean, these are the questions that you can ask. So I do think, I think there should be bans. I think both teams should not be allowed to compete in the competition next season.
Yeah.
And then the following season, if they actually do get to the finals or get to that competition, they have qualified, I would start them off with -5 points because it's a league competition.
Yeah.
You're almost saying -5 points you start off with. And I'm looking at ways in which you can actually penalize the club as a whole so that they respond more effectively. I also want UEFA, I want the English Premier League, I want them to, and the IFAB, I want retrospective action taken. I want, when acts of simulation, acts of cheating take place, it's outside the spirit of the game, and therefore the penalty has to be severe. And I, if that happens in the early stages of the competition, kick them out. Go for the legal battle.
It's all about money, Keith. And don't you think it's all about money and winning, and literally winning at all costs? And we've discussed this, and at the risk of being repetitious and boring and so on, it's win at all costs. And if that means cheating and diving and hoodwinking the referee and screaming and looking for things that you're not entitled to, then so be it, seems to be the order of the day.
Yes.
Now, I'll come back to us as referees. Is it not partly our fault? We are the custodians of the game, and it's up to us to dish out the appropriate punishment according to the laws of the game. Now, I believe Anthony Taylor, who's a very good referee, and for the first time, I think in all the times I've watched him, I saw him lose his cool almost.
Yes.
Getting angry with the players for what they were doing. That's not Anthony Taylor.
No.
Anthony Taylor and Michael Oliver are off the same, they're cut from the same, what's the word I'm looking for?
Cloth.
They're the same type of individuals. They don't lose their cool.
No.
And yet, I thought they forced Anthony Taylor to lose his cool. He was so sick and tired of them.
Yeah.
Was it not time then? But you see, this is a rhetorical question. Was it not time to issue a red card? But they weren't doing anything serious enough for a red card. And it's almost as if they queue up. You got a yellow card. I'll do it this time, and I've got a yellow card now. You do it the next time. And that's why he accumulated so many cards. Howard Webb did the same in the 2010 Cup final.
Correct.
A lot of yellow cards as well.
Yeah.
There surely has to be a time when the cutoff comes that, say, for example, after 3 yellow cards to a team, the next one, regardless of the seriousness, it doesn't have to be serious foul play. It's got to be red.
Well, let me give you. I think the governing bodies will sort of not go there yet. But my answer to the governing bodies would be, let us introduce into the professional game the sin bin. So let us take the view that after 3 yellow cards, the next one is a yellow card plus a sin bin. And thereafter, plus a sin bin. Well, a minimum 10 minutes.
Yeah.
A minimum 10. Now, I don't, that's what happens at grassroots level. And I think that the referee at the elite level needs another form of sanction to be available to him on the field of play. And therefore, for me, the sin bin becomes part of the process. I think in addition to that, I do generally believe that the IFAB and FIFA have got to seriously discuss re-refereeing some of these games in the appropriate manner. By that I mean, where you've got open cheating, it's not going to influence the result, but it's going to involve some form of sanction. This type of thing, in a post-match review, could in fact elicit a form of sanction.
I wonder, Keith, let's take the sin bin thing a little bit further.
Yes.
Instead of after the third one, or on the third one, supposing they reduce the sin bin to 5 minutes, but make it like rugby. Every time there's a yellow card, you're off for 5 minutes.
Well, I think we've got to strengthen.
And hopefully then that the opposition score, that will send a message out, this has got to stop. Because they have to do something to stop all this cheating and shenanigans that are going on in the games today. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah. Well,
just getting back to Anthony Taylor, Keith.
Yes, sorry.
What about the security? Well, obviously that would have been at the stadium, but on his way through the airport, and all perpetrated. Let's not pull out punches. All perpetrated the behavior of Jose Mourinho, because he was stirring the pot.
Yeah. Let's first of all, when you're going to a European game, you have police outriders, you have a huge security presence, and you get to the ground. At the ground, you've got people around you and security available. The first thing that surprised me was the lack of security that allowed Mourinho, knowing that the boss, if you like, the coach that's going to take the team, Mourinho's team, probably back to the airport immediately, because most teams fly out immediately after the game in Europe. The referee, however, has to stay there till about 12 noon the following day. And then, of course, he goes to the airport in a bus with no security, and he's on a scheduled flight. So, but he's business class. So that helps to some degree. I think that UEFA have got to make different arrangements in the future to make certain that the referee is covered. There is police protection to ensure that he's safely the other side of the gate of the terminal in order to ensure that he's safe. I think that's the first criteria that they must match. But
yeah, he shouldn't have to walk through normal. He shouldn't have to walk through the normal departures. He should have, like diplomats do. There should be a back entrance or a side entrance or something like that to get him onto the plane first.
Yes. And I think, I think those are the arrangements that UEFA have the power to be able to put in place. Yeah. I think, both at a final, it's a stadium that is not in either country. It's usually in a different country to the participating teams. Sure. I think it's just part of a process that should be there. This whole security of, Mourinho shouldn't have been able to get anywhere near Taylor.
No,
his words were atrocious.
Yeah.
And no referee, no matter how well or how indifferently he's performed, should not have to face those consequences. And of course, I have no doubt that the vision of that, which reverberated around the world in social media terms, brought almost immediate response from UEFA. But UEFA should have had security people there to escort Mourinho away from the referee.
Yeah. Because Anthony Taylor was lucky. I'm just going to show a couple of clips now. This young lady, and I've shown it before, and I make no apologies for showing it again. This young lady, a referee in Pakistan, was assaulted, and you can see the blood coming down behind her right ear there. And what happened, my namesake, but no relation to me, a guy called Daniel Sweeney here, was assaulted by four thugs in the car park. And I think I've shown this one before as well. And Daniel was to come on the show, but he has got legal proceedings, so obviously then he can't. But thankfully, and I was going to say that they are not rare. They are happening out there, and we just don't hear about it. But thankfully, it didn't happen to Anthony Taylor. But it could have. You could have got some lunatic, again, stirred up by Mourinho's comments, could have attacked him with a baseball bat or a gun or a knife.
Well, at the airport, Errol, there was a chair thrown. You saw very close to where Anthony and his family were moving, I think, in towards the gate. Someone, he was obviously threatened, and a chair was thrown, which, could have created a serious injury.
Sure.
I do worry that this escapade and what is taking place in the professional game is cascading down to grassroots level. And I in a week that we saw this, I was applauding the FA in England, because the FA announced at the beginning of last week, that at level 7, grassroots level, they are now going to introduce a sanction of points deduction for misconduct. So the FA have acted in a very positive manner. They've seen, the BBC and others have promoted the idea of the problems for grassroots football. Shows like our own, which are seen by lots of referees, lots of people in high places, and they've reacted by bringing in this sanction. I think it might be a secondary sanction, i.e., if first one, okay, we'll look at it. But second one, if they believe it's strong enough, they will deduct points, up to 5 points off a team for misconduct. Now,
Pete, why can't they do that from the top down?
I think
they will not grasp the nettle.
No,
they need to grasp the nettle and deal with this issue. Otherwise, it's literally giving lip service. Now, I know the assaults and so on are taking place at lower levels, and it needs to be done there. But why don't they blanket across the board and say, from next year, blah, 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 a committee will sit and decide. They do it to clubs who go into administration, have money, and they can deduct them up to 10, 15 points.
Yes.
Why can't they deduct the team 3 points a match? And if they've won the match, then they lose and the other team gets the points. Why can't they do something like that and really grasp the net?
Well, I think that there is a restriction, I think, in terms of the governing body, the IFAB and FIFA, in terms of what they can and cannot do. And of course, the governing body is very much against the idea of re-refereeing football matches. And they put under that banner the deduction of points. But in fairness, the FA have taken the action. Now, that might be an action that says, let us measure the impact before we actually take it further. Of course, when you get to the senior level, and I've sat there having dismissed a player with a red card in law, and then the following week sat in front of a tribunal involving a barrister of a football club, questioning my every move in terms of law.
Sorry, can I just stop you there?
Yes.
I mean, you shouldn't be questioned.
No.
Because Law 5 says that the referee's decision is final.
Something that I put over.
Be questioned about the decision you make.
Yeah, well, that's the point that I raised in front of the barrister and in front of the panel at the FA. I made it very clear that of my responsibilities to the game, and on 2 occasions in that meeting, I advised the barrister that I was not on trial. I'd followed the law. Yeah. Here was the law, and quoted it, and said that your client had broken the law, and the consequence of that is the law tells me as a referee, instructs me as a referee, that is a red card offence. So I think that the football as a whole, in the world that we're now living, where people can examine incidents that take place on the field of play almost within seconds of it actually taking place, which undermine to some degree the aspects of referee at the very top level. And I do think that somehow we've got to see a balancing mechanism that says, when games like this become almost out of control, then there's got to be a step process that the referee can take on the field of play, and then the administrators can sanction post-match.
Just to wind up on this, what kind of punishment do you think Mourinho should get?
I'm quite clear. I think that the punishment in UEFA is much stronger, of course, than in the English Premier League. As we saw a couple of weeks ago, we saw the manager of Liverpool, Klopp, given a 1-match touchline ban. He served that ban the following week, but was in the stand with all the communication of kit available to him to instruct his team on the field of play. In Europe, they either get a...
Didn't that happen to Arsene Wenger a few years ago? And wasn't he fined or something, or sanctioned again for actually giving instructions from the stand?
That was way back. And I think that might well have been UEFA. But from UEFA's point of view, when they sank a touchline ban, there's 2 things that they do. Either one, you're banned from the stadium, not allowed. The second one is that you arrive at the stadium, not in the team bus, and you go immediately to the director's box and you sit next to a UEFA official who monitors your every action, and you're not allowed to use mobile phone. So they, in fairness to them, they're pretty strict on those sanctions.
Yeah.
So for me, I think what should happen to Mourinho is the ultimate thing is he's not allowed to manage a team in any European knockout competition for a full season. So that's the first one. The second one, if you want, is a minimum 10-match touchline ban. 5 of those to be a ban completely. He can't come to the stadium with his team. The second 5, he goes into the director's box and not allowed to communicate tactics to his team. And I think, the financial bit, as you rightly point out at the beginning of the programme, it is not a deterrent.
Okay, I'm sure we get lots of comments on that. Thanks again, Keith, for joining me. Just to close the show, a couple of incidents from the FA Cup final last week between Manchester City and Manchester United. I had a message from a regular watcher, David Meyer, here in Ireland, and David said, what's your opinion, and will you discuss, please, the Casemiro foul?
Yeah, I was quite clear. I watched the game on TV. Immediately I saw that challenge, which endangered the safety of an opponent, in my opinion, a red card. There was not a red card forthcoming. There wasn't VAR intervention. I was rather surprised that he got away with it. Now, okay, it's an FA Cup final. You want 22 players on the field of play. But ultimately, if you're a referee and you're a strong referee and a red card offence takes place, you have to go. In that same game, Grealish was penalised.
I was just going to ask you about that. Yeah, the penalty.
Well, Grealish was penalised for handball. I think I've said it on more than one occasion. The handball law, as it stands at this moment in time, is an ass. It's just not possible to get a consistent opinion on what is and what is not handball because of the interpretation on does the player make his body shape bigger? And what I think is not missing, but what is confusing is that the natural reaction of a player of movement is a movement of hands and arms. And the arms do go high, not above elbow level, but they do tend to go high when you're gaining elevation. And they do tend to be out when you're spinning. Or turning. It's a natural body movement. And I think the law is overcomplicated when it needs to go back to the word deliberate. And I believe, for me, and I've talked to a number of referees, we share the same view that this was a very harsh penalty kick. And I've yet to have of the colleagues that are close by me to actually agree that that was a penalty kick that should be given. I personally wouldn't have given that penalty kick. And as a referee, I've not given it, as Paul Tierney didn't. But then VAR came in, and all of a sudden he's got to go to the screen. And at that point, I think it's going to be very difficult for Paul Tierney, although Howard Webb has made it very clear to his referees, if you're happy with the decision you've given and that screen doesn't give you anything to change your mind or change your decision, stick with your decision. And I think that Tierney took the easy option of in his opinion, going handball and awarding the penalty kick. I wouldn't have given the penalty kick.
Keith, as always, great pleasure having you on the show and having your insights and for you, the viewers, and all the comments you make. We might make another, if anything happens this weekend in the Champions League final, Keith, maybe we'll go again next Monday, all depending on what's happening. Thank you very much. We'll talk in the morning, by the way, on the radio. I hope you listen into that. Thank you. Good night.
Thanks. Bye.